My name's Daniel Taylor and I'm from Brisbane, Australia. Moved here to the US 4 years ago. Yeah, I had actually a really good childhood. My dad owned his own pharmacy and my mum was a nurse. And so my two brothers and we felt like we were rich, even though mum and dad would say that we weren't rich. You know, they were kind of living beyond their means. We had a comfortable house. We had a vacation house on an island just off the coast of Brisbane in Queensland, Australia. So my next eldest brother, Matt, he left school when he was 15 and became a motor mechanic. And so his tradie mates would come over and we had a room underneath my parents' house that had a pool table and a single yellow fluorescent light tube. And they'd be drinking beer and smoking pot down there. And so as a 16-year-old adolescent, my first experience with drugs and alcohol was with my elder brother and his buddies. My drug of choice was methamphetamine. And I think, you know, I used meth recreationally and ecstasy, cocaine, for quite a number of years before I actually got really hooked on those drugs from an addictive lifestyle perspective, more going to dance parties and just doing crazy stuff on the weekend with my friends. And so it wasn't until a girl that I'd been living with for 3 years, she got pregnant and I was really excited to have a family. I was 23 at the time. After being with her for 3 years, she told me that she didn't love me and she wasn't going to stay with me and she had no intentions of keeping that baby. And so she packed up her bags and moved out, and 3 days later aborted that child. And that for me was really the beginning of the end as far as my addictive behaviors were concerned. It just broke my heart to know that I had done something that produced this young child's life, and then without any opportunity to save that kid's life, that child was aborted, and I didn't know how to cope with that. And so what was a recreational pursuit of drug use became kind of the norm for me. I quit my job as a nurse and I started to use drugs on a daily basis. Switched from snorting speed, snorting coke, dropping ecstasy tabs to actually shooting up methamphetamine. And so I kind of went on this awful 7 or 8 year period of my life where I was just shooting up meth, you know, 6 or 8 times a day, sleeping maybe once a week. I think my relationship with my family, I was so ashamed of my behavior, even though my parents always were reaching out to me and showing me, you know, no matter what was going on in my life, they still loved me. I couldn't accept their love, and so I distanced myself from my mum and dad, and I didn't really see them very much at all from 1994 until about just before the end of 1997. I maybe saw my parents like 6 or 8 times. And then my relationship with my brothers broke down as well. You know, I had made up stories at times where I needed cash for drugs. I never actually stole anything from my family, but I manipulated them with stories and had them kind of lending me money that, you know, I swore one day I'm going to pay that back to you. And I visited my brother in Canada, actually. He got married. He went off to become a missionary for a couple of years. Met this missionary gal who was from Canada. I ended up moving to Canada. I went to visit with them in 1998, and I had opened up to a certain level about my lifestyle with my parents, but my brother Matt was completely in the dark about where I'd been and what I'd been doing. And so I was visiting with them in Canada for about 3 weeks, and about 2 days before we left Canada to come back home, my brother Matt came to me and he said, "Dan, I've been praying for you. And God's showed me these things about your life." And he recounted 3 or 4 things that I had either done or I had felt about myself that he couldn't possibly know. And, you know, because he couched it by saying, "I've been praying for you and these are things that God showed me," I was really fearful because my understanding and even experience with authority wasn't very good at the school that I went to, you know, and I was thinking, you know, if God knows those things about me, man, he's just gonna squish me like a bug. But the revelation that I got was if God knew these things about me and he hadn't dealt with me fiercely at this point, maybe he really did love me. And the way that my brother delivered that information to me, something just snapped in my heart, and I knew I knew that God had seen every single choice that I'd ever made, every evil choice, every wicked thing that I'd ever done, every time I shoved a needle in my arm, every time I got off on pornography. I knew God was watching me. And yet there was no sense. I felt shame and guilt myself, but what I experienced from God was this amazing love, this amazing acceptance. Not that He thought that my behavior was appropriate or acceptable or good, none of that. Like I knew in my heart that the things that I'd done were wicked and terrible and wrong. But the revelation that I got was that despite all of that, God had a plan for my life. Despite all of those things that I had done, there was hope. God was showing me that there's hope through His plan for my life. And all I had to do was get down on my knees and surrender. America, hope is here.